Hello and welcome to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. The one word that aptly describes American politics today is divisions. The line that divides liberals from conservatives is deep and even worrisome. To make things worse, there are some of the same dividing lines within the major political parties. Can these breaches be mended? Cross-talking parties in crisis. I'm joined by my guest, Steve Maltzberg in New York. He is a conservative political commentator. And in Purcellville, we have Ned Ryan. He is the founder and CEO of American Majority. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Steve, let me go to you. Obviously, we've seen with the result of the last election cycle, actually, I'm going all the way back to 2010, is that we have these growing divisions between the parties. But one of the things that really concerns me is the divisions within the parties as well. We have a sitting president, nominally head of the Republican Party, has very little support in Congress to get his agenda done, which the American people voted for. There's no doubt about that. But also we have in the Democratic Party, Hillary simply will not go away. And this new attacks on Bernie Sanders. I mean, one would have thought it would be time to start healing. I mean, and the Republicans should get in line instead of aligning themselves with sometimes Democrats, responding more to donors and their own political future here. So, do we have the two parties that are really kind of diffuse right now and don't have a very clear mission? Because we have individuals that do, but we don't have the parties doing the same thing. And needless to say, the Democrats have absolutely nothing to say. Go ahead.
Well, I think the Democrats are in bigger trouble. I'll get to the Republicans in a second. I think the Democrats, it's been what, how many, 3, 4 congressional elections in a row that have resulted in the where we are right now with the Congress being overwhelmingly in the House Republican and the Senate, of course. I mean, this has gone on election cycle after election cycle, and the Democrats don't seem to get it. Now, in the aftermath of the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, notwithstanding the fact that Hillary not only won't go away, but now she won't rule out contesting the election.
Amazing.
If you could believe that one.
Amazing.
Who's the leader? They have no direction. They have no leadership. You got Bernie Sanders. He's a socialist. You got Elizabeth Warren. You got the Congressional Black Caucus. You got Schumer. You got Pelosi. They're all over the place. Now, as far as the Republicans go, very, very disheartening that the leadership hasn't learned a thing.
Okay. Well, I guess ditto. Right. Go ahead, Ned, jump in there. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ned. Go ahead.
No, I do want to jump in again, but highlight the fact, forget about the Democrat Party at the federal level. They have been absolutely devastated at the state level as well. Between 2010 and 2016, they've lost about 1,100 seats at the state and federal level. If you look at the governorships, there's 34 Republican governors, and there's 70 of the 99 state legislatures that are now in Republican hands, and you have over 25 trifectas, meaning Republican governor, state Senate, and state House in Republican hands. The Democrat Party has been devastated over the last 6 years, again, because there is no really strong message that resonates with the American people. But you're also talking about there are some fractures within the Republican Party. But the point that I want to make about people call it the Trump agenda, no, Republicans across the board ran on tax reform and repealing Obamacare. This is not just Trump's agenda. This is the Republican agenda. So when you look at I call it intentional inability to push forward this agenda, I'm not really sure what Republicans are thinking, because guess who's on the ballot next year? They are, not Trump. And so they better figure out for self-preservation, how are they going to get some of these things done, again, repealing Obamacare and moving on tax reform?
Steve, speak to that, because it's really because what's really quite remarkable, because Ned's absolutely right. For 7.5 years, they said, let's get rid of Obamacare, and now it's dropping into their hands. And then you have again the divisions within the Republican Party. You had John McCain, I think, out of spite more than anything else. Really, it's beyond comprehension sometimes. I don't know if you saw his speech. I mean, there were snippets of it that were a real state statesman, and then he ended up really being, a jerk on the floor of the Senate. I mean, this is the thing that I'm talking about, because there is, when you cut cut underneath the president here and his agenda, then no one is winning. The Republicans aren't winning, the Democrats aren't winning, and the American people aren't winning either. I mean, I don't see any real strong responsibility. And, I can take, or leave Trump. Okay, that's a totally different issue here. But I'm talking what people asked for from their elected representatives. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I like the fact, to a degree, that the Republicans don't march in lockstep like the Democrats do. I mean, there are some things to be said for marching in lockstep because things get done, but the Republicans, to the credit of some of them, don't. I mean, there's a lot of different factions within that party. However, having said that, seeing the opportunity that's been presented with the kind of victory that Donald Trump won, with what he has brought to the table, how he's energized the country, energized the base, and having the House and having the Senate, to have people like John McCain, and he's certainly not alone, thwart the health care almost single-handedly, as you point out, and do it with a bitterness and do it with a vengeance against Donald Trump. And to hear people like the leadership, like McConnell, go after Trump, and Paul Ryan criticize Trump at every turn, at every tweet. Right. I mean, this is beyond real political differences within the Republican Party. There are people, and the leadership is included, that just don't want to see Donald Trump. They think he's an aberration, and they think he's going to bring them down, and they don't realize they're bringing themselves down.
Right. There's a huge misreading of the electorate still.
I think
Go ahead, Ned, jump in. Go ahead.
No, I would argue, in fact, I agree with Steve, that they need to understand they are working against their own interests. Forget about the fact that there is some strong personal dislike of Trump within the GOP establishment. In fact, it's becoming very apparent, again, as I said, that Paul Ryan and to a greater degree Mitch McConnell, there has been a certain inability, and it's been intentional to not pass. The thing that I will say, though, is as you start to look at where they're at right now with the Cassidy-Graham bill, you're looking at tax reform, I think they're starting to at least understand that 2018 is coming, and the American people have a very short fuse these days. If they will not pass legitimate tax reform and legitimate health care reform, they're going to be in trouble next year. And I would say, again, Paul Ryan has to understand there are no givens that people will simply vote for Republicans because they're not Democrats. People want to see legitimate reform. Again, the working class. There's a reason that 6 to 8 million of the working class that voted for Obama voted for Trump in 2016. They want to see something that addresses their issues, which, again, are jobs, the economy, future security, immigration, all of these things. And the argument I make to a lot of these GOP establishment people that are struggling with the Trump agenda, you know what? Follow the agenda, and I think he can take them to dominance of decades if they will simply pass the three big things: tax reform, health care reform, and immigration reform.
Steve, one of the things that's interesting, I mean,
okay, but they know this.
Hang on here. One of the things that I think interesting, since Hillary Clinton stole the primary from Bernie Sanders, we would have had Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. But what I think is really interesting is that really see, my shtick is this: I'm not really enamored with the parties, okay? I'm more interested in the outlook, and that we would have had very starkly different outlooks in that race. And I think it might have been healthy for the country to see what would have played out, because it might have been more definitive. But of course, Hillary cheated, as she always does, and her husband always do, okay? And they continue to do, okay? And I think this is one of the things that is very telling about the establishment parties. They are not listening to their electorates on left and right. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, no, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, again, I think Hillary is really insignificant. I think Democrats wish she'd go away, and some have said so, some have said it quietly, and I don't think there's a Clinton wing of the party any longer. I just don't think I think there's too many wings of that party, and I think they're going to suffer for it big time. However, I do agree that and I don't see, this is what I don't understand, Republican leadership and Republicans in Congress and in the Senate have to know that if they don't get things done, if they don't pass tax reform, if they don't repeal and replace Obamacare, then they're going to lose control, quite possibly, of the House and maybe the Senate. They have to know this. Yet the year has gone by. They took their vacation. They're doing nothing. That the leadership is bad-mouthing the president. Right. Is that going to all turn around in 2018?
I don't know. They never should have gone on vacation because they didn't do any work here. Let me go to Ned before we go to the break here. I think there is a Clinton wing of the Democratic Party, and it's called the mainstream media. They're the ones that continue to support her failed, unpopular agenda. The media is doing it. Go ahead.
Well, I would argue again that a lot of us have viewed the mainstream media as the PR arm of the Democrat Party. But I would actually agree that the Clinton wing is shrinking. This is not the same Democrat Party that it was 20 years ago.
Sure.
I mean, it's the same in name, but its essence has changed. I mean, the Democrat Party right now, I believe, is being devoured inside by its far-left donors and by its far-left grassroots. And I truly believe that in 2020, the Democrat Party will actually put up someone so far to the left of mainstream America that you will have those clear choices that we didn't have in 2016.
That's a very good way. And Tifa also is a wing of the Democratic Party, I would argue here. Steve, I'll give you 1 minute before we go to the break. Go ahead, Steve. 1 minute for the break.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. I mean, you talk about how the party's changed since Bill Clinton. He's had to apologize for signing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He's had to apologize for welfare reform. He's had to apologize for the crime bill and putting people in jail. Everything he did, he had to say, I'm sorry. Imagine how it's changed from the days of Kennedy. I mean, John Kennedy wouldn't know what the heck he's looking at. So I believe in 2020 and beyond, this party is falling off the cliff. That's absolutely the case.
You know, and Bill Clinton never apologized for what he should have apologized for. Gentlemen, we're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue with discussion on parties in crisis. Welcome back to Crosstalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter LaBelle. To remind you, we're discussing parties in crisis. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Doug Weed in Washington. He's a presidential historian and a former White House advisor to 2 American presidents. And also, before, I want to plug his book here, Game of Thorns, Inside Story of Hillary Clinton's Failed Campaign and Donald Trump's Winning Strategy. All right, in the first part of the program, we're talking about the problems that both major parties are facing here. I want to change the gear a little bit and give this to you, Doug. Is there such a thing as Trumpism? And if there is, will Trumpism survive Donald Trump? Go ahead, Doug.
Hi, Peter. Well, I was listening in on part of that conversation earlier, and I felt the one thing that was missing is that both parties, Republican and Democrat, are so corrupt. There are wonderful people who are serving in the legislature and wonderful people who are serving in agencies of government, and some of them are extremely honest, but there are so many deals going on. I'll hire your nephew, please hire my wife and pay her 10 times what she's worth. The level of corruption is so great. Who cares whether you're a Democrat or Republican? I just want my money. That's what's going on. And Donald Trump represents a threat to both Democrats and Republicans and big companies who are on the make, who are on the take. They gave money to the Clinton Foundation. They expected it back 100 times over with government contracts. Corporate welfare now exceeds welfare for the poor. So Donald Trump represents not so much a new party or even a new philosophy. He is the great disruptor. He represents a threat to the corruption that has reached a level like Brazil or Congo, even though it's legal.
Okay, well, if I go to Steve here, what I like here is that you have two visions there. You can watch the president on Twitter, or you can watch the Emmys. Okay, I'll decide. Let the viewer decide which one you'll be forced to lose your lunch here. But Steve, one of the things that I think is really, really important here is that, like him or dislike him, respect him or disrespect him, Trump has figured out the electoral strategy for possibly a generation to come. Okay? and I think that's what's really significant here, okay, is how his appeal, maybe not his personal appeal, but his approach to politicking on a nationwide scale. And I think that's the most significant thing about Trumpism. Go ahead, Steve.
Trumpism is being unafraid. I knew that of the 17 candidates up on that stage during the Republican primaries, the only one that could beat Hillary Clinton was Donald Trump, because I knew he would say things and go places that none of the others would. The others would act like John McCain and Mitt Romney, and oh, you can't say that, and oh, you better not bring that up. Donald Trump is unafraid, and that's what's driving, I think, the leadership of the Republican Party crazy, because they still think that if you act civil, if you do it, don't offend anybody, don't offend an independent, just play by the Republican traditional playbook, which loses, and the media will love you and everybody will love you, and that's not it. Donald Trump has proven that does not exist anymore, and people like Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and others just can't accept that and won't accept that. They think that when Trump goes, somehow, someday, some way, you know, as he doesn't run again or he loses or whatever, things will be back to normal. They will never be normal again.
You know, Ned, I think the average voter doesn't want to be loved. I think they want to have a functioning economy and solid borders, okay, and a future to look forward to. I don't care if I am loved, okay? I think this message here, again, this is the media that does this. This is the media that does this all the time. I'm offended. I'm offended by the media and what they concentrate on. What, 2 scoops of ice cream? Who's standing next to whom? What is this all about? It's like criminology in Washington. It's ridiculous here. And I think that's what I'm agreeing with what Doug said here, is that, you know, in your face, this is what we're going to do. You're with us or you're not with us. And if you don't like it, vote us out. Okay? That's as simple as that. We don't need a conspiracy theory like we've seen for the last year. Go ahead, Ned.
That's right. No, but there are a couple things, though, that Doug hit upon that I think you need to consider when you're looking at American politics. I actually wrote about this a few years ago. It's people want to look at it as Republican versus Democrat. I think you need to look at it more of a ruling class versus the non-ruling class versus the American people.
I agree.
And if you start to look at that framework and understand that Republican establishment, Democrat establishment, there's a certain status quo that they don't want to see changed. And I don't like it when it's called Trumpism, because the thing that I think that Donald Trump has hit upon that the American people have embraced is a common sense approach. I've said it's not Republicanism or Democratism, it's Americanism. And that's why I think that you do have the ability, don't call it Trumpism, but call it common sense Americanism, that it will last long beyond Donald Trump's presidency, because people are realizing we've entered a little bit, Peter, I call it a post-party era, where people will still register as Democrats or Republicans, but there won't be a strict party allegiance. They will want leaders that will actually come up with ideas, again, that the American people think put them first and not a ruling class or not other interests, but the American people who provide most of the tax base that funds our government.
Well, in the last election, the results prove that.
Go
ahead, real quick, Steve, jump in.
I was going to say, with all due respect, I don't think the people care that this guy's son is being hired by this congressman. If you hire my daughter, and I'll give you this. I just think they elect people. They expect them to do what they were elected to do and keep their promises. And all that other stuff gets pushed a little bit to the side.
I don't know if it gets pushed to the side here. Let me go back to Doug here. I mentioned the Emmys here already in this program. And it seems to me that this is just enraging the heartland. I mean, rich people giving each other awards for really mediocre acting, okay, and other forms of entertainment, and they're all wearing beautiful dresses, you know. I think the heartland's saying, I'd like a nice dress too, I just want a decent job, okay? And I just think this is stark polarization in the culture right now. Culture matters. I think the Democrats don't have a clue about that. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's part of the secret to his election success. It's the drain the swamp. I mean, the rich got richer, the poor got poorer under two presidents, a Democrat and Republican, at an accelerated rate. And if the rich got richer because they outworked the poor or were smarter than the poor, I would accept it. But 73,000 pages of regulations to open a manufacturing firm in the United States. Democrats. You know why? Not because they care about meeting all these issues and conditions, but because they want to keep you out. And if you start a hamburger joint in America today, your tax money will go to subsidize your competitor down the street. He'll get $100 million interest-free loan from the Federal Reserve. You got to pay through the nose to get money from your relatives to try to get it started, or a bank. It's a corrupt system, and it's reached the point that it's touched me. I lost the value of my home. I lose the value of my 401ks. So now I'm mad. I didn't mind you hiring your nephew or your niece and all the corruption until it hit me.
Yep.
But now it's hit me, and I'm mad.
Right. You know, Ned, it's a private club, but we're not invited, okay? That's absolutely clear, okay? And it's not based on merit whatsoever. It's based on what your values or perceived values are, okay? And this is what this groupthink in the elites. And I throw the Republicans in there too, okay? Because they're fat and happy. Absolutely. They like how the way things are working, okay? And again, I really want to go back to the media. I think the media perpetuates this narrative, okay? They got the election wrong. They got the polls wrong. And I think they're really still very wrong. But they must pay a price for it. Go ahead, Ned.
No, and you look, too, I'm all about a free press. I'm also about a free and honest press. And if you look at the percentages of negative coverage about Donald Trump, they're not even trying to be objective. They are trying to drive a narrative. And this is why I've said that a lot of these people claiming to be journalists are, in fact, opinionists. And people that are saying they're reporters are actually just giving their opinions and trying to drive a narrative. And that's why I totally agree with Steve Bannon when he said the media is acting as an opposition party. And at some point, the American people are tuning them out. And that's why you're seeing the rise of some of these other outlets, whether it's Breitbart or other outlets that are trying to report news and saying we're being honest about where we're coming from. Yes, we have a certain worldview, but we're just trying to report the facts and be objective, at least on some level. The mainstream media has left behind any objectivity, and they are working as an opposition party. And I think a lot of you see the American people going, hey, we just want to hear the facts. Let us make our own decisions for ourselves.
Okay, but apparently Antifa wants to make those decisions. By the way, Don Lemon on CNN doesn't believe they even exist here. Doug addressed that issue. I guess I must have, I had eye surgery a half a year ago. I guess it didn't work because I've watched one clip after another, of people dressed in black using bike chains to slug people, and they seem to get off the hook. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think Antifa may come back to bite the Democrats because the Republicans have been clear, Trump has been clear, rejecting the KKK and rejecting right-wing extremist groups. But I haven't heard a very clear, resounding rejection from the Democrats of Antifa. So I think it's going to stick to them. I just wanted to say, because earlier you were talking about the media, there's motive. The media is tied up with the corporate world, which benefits from the corruption in Washington. Right. I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. Years ago, when I worked in the White House of George H.W. Bush, when I first went into my office in the White House, I had people coming in to sit down next to me saying, well, you're going to support this, you're going to support that. So why would I do that? I believe in free enterprise. They said, because the liberals do it when they're in power. If we conservatives don't do it when we get in power, we'll get left behind. So I was astonished. That was years ago. It's much worse now.
I want to go to Steve and give Steve the last word. I don't know if you saw the clip about Nancy Pelosi talking about DACA, and she was shouted down by people demanding that 11 million people be amnestied. I think the revolution is eating itself. Last word, Steve. Go ahead.
Well, this is a very good lesson, and one that Republicans should have learned a long time ago. And John McCain especially, after he ran for president, he became, when he was running, he was an enemy. He was great to the media before and after. They loved him before and after, but when he was running, they hated him. No matter what Donald Trump or any Republican does on DACA, on health care, on anything, if they give in to the Democrats this much, if they let DACA people stay here, but they don't let their relatives in, but they don't let the parents stay, but the 30 seconds after this legislation is signed, the Democrats and the media will say, well, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? You will never, Republicans, you will never get credit for what you do. Never.
Very spirited debate, gentlemen. We've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests in Purcellville, New York, and in Washington. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.